challenge that we have when it comes to our growing population that is putting an impact on our housing programs is largely through our temporary programs. So the temporary foreign workers program, or in particular the international student program. And this is where we have a serious issue that we need to address and are working to address now.
Housing Minister Sean Fraser amplifying comments from Immigration Minister Mark Miller on our program question period this weekend. Have a listen.
It's really a system that has gotten out of control, and it's a conversation that we need to have with the provinces to make sure that the provinces that have not been doing their jobs actually rein in those numbers on a pure volume basis.
The Immigration and Housing Ministers are both focusing, as you heard there, on the international student program as cause for concern after reporting from the Canadian press last week showed the feds were warned their immigration policy would impact the housing market, something Tory leader Pierre Poilievre jumped on.
I find it incredible that CP didn't even mention the name Sean Fraser in its article on this issue, because Sean Fraser was the Minister of Immigration when the government warned him that his policies were leading to housing price inflation. And now Justin Trudeau has promoted him to Housing Minister. You wonder why you can't afford a home? Well, there's your answer right there.
There's a whole lot to unpack in what you just heard, so let's bring in the front bench to do just that. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's now a principal at Shakti Strategies. Shakir Chamber worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. He's now a principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. Former interim NDP National Director Carl Bélanger is with us. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And next to him, that's Marika Walsh. She's a senior political reporter with the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Good to see you. Carl, I'll start with you. Let's start on the Fed's response over the past number of days to that initial report from the Canadian press. Do you think they had any other choice politically other than to float, once again, the concept of a cap on international students?
They had to do something. Obviously, they come to the realization that if you bring in more people that the market can deliver units to house them, you're going to have a problem. But there's another problem and a challenge they're trying to tackle, which is labor shortage in many key industries. And to tackle that, you need to bring in more people. So something's got to give somewhere. And it was interesting considering that for months, some premiers, especially Premier Legault in Quebec, has been saying, we can't welcome more. Our capacity to welcome them has been reached. And you keep raising the targets and bringing them more people, more immigrants. Something's got to give, and I think that's what we're seeing now.
There's a kind of significant distinguishment, I guess you could say, both politically and from a policy perspective, Shakir. The feds have a permanent immigration stream target of 485,000 last year, 500 in the next 2 years, and thereby after, depending on how things go, but that's what they say right now. There's also a temporary stream of immigration, international students, which you heard the ministers refer to, as well as what Carl mentioned, temporary foreign workers. They seem to be very much focused on the international students. Part of the reason for that is under their watch, and even a bit before it, the numbers shot up, and especially so in the last few years. Do you anticipate they will do something like bring in a cap in short order?
I think there'll be some kind of cap moving forward. I think that's an easy one to kind of pick off for the Liberal government, but there's also going to be spin-off effects, right? If you look like a province like Ontario, our university tuition has been capped for, I think, the past 6 or so years. A lot of universities and even colleges rely on international students for, funding to fund their universities. So something's going to have to give if he caps. What is Ontario going to do? And I think Mark Miller made the comment on your show yesterday. He has to work with the provinces to find a solution. So we'll see what he does moving forward. I think the one thing I would say for Minister Miller is that the environment for him to make a move is right? If you look at poll after poll, there are a lot of Canadians saying that, immigration levels are a little too high right now, and it's getting to a majority of Canadians. And it's not a matter of being like in an ideological position that we just oppose immigration, but it's a matter of, housing affordability is becoming this big issue for Canadians. So I think Minister Miller has the kind of political window to make a move that he should have made a long time ago, but ultimately it's better late than never.
I think also the importance of making that move is underscored by what Shakir lays out, and that is like this long-held adherence Canadians have to the idea that immigration is actually beneficial to our society, right? And we have seen poll after poll recently, Sabrina, show that that is eroding. Not a huge amount, but it is starting to erode, largely because of the implications of those targets and the numbers. Like the numbers are huge just for people watching. Temporary residents, mostly comprised of foreign workers and international students, as we've said, in the third quarter of last year, were more than 300,000 people. Like, they are largely driving population growth in this country right now.
I think the biggest risk, as kind of you mentioned there, Vassy, is this conversation around immigration and housing turning into a conversation around xenophobia and like the rejection of this identity that Canadians have built on being a welcoming country. And so I think for the minister, both Minister Fraser and Minister Miller, really they need to quickly get stakeholders to the table. I think it's clear that this is not just a federal issue that can be dealt with on its own. They have to bring the provinces to the table, and they have to bring businesses and universities to the table, because businesses and universities have been demanding immigration increase in numbers over the last 10 years. And so if they've been demanding this increase, but they haven't been able to provide support, where is the disconnect? And I think, for the provinces, there hasn't been that accountability on specifically affordable housing. And I think that that's a distinction that Minister Fraser needs to make. Where are the housing investments going? Like, you can build supply and you can build market housing, but a lot of the folks on the, temporary foreign worker side or on the international student side can't afford to buy a home, and they're not looking for market housing. They're looking for affordable housing. And provinces have decimated affordable housing in the last, 15 years. And so that needs to go back to the provinces for their accountability and investment.
And I think there's different lines of accountability around supply for sure. But the basic kind of fact we're dealing with right now, Marika, is that any increases to supply, of which there are different initiatives right across the country right now, only come with time. If there's an acute crisis right now, it feels like there comes a moment, and the minister's comments today and over the weekend sort of indicate this to me, that you have to confront the demand side of the equation.
Yeah, and it seems like they are coming to this realization again. They came to it or floated it in August, and when Minister Fraser first said, as housing minister, that maybe they should look at a cap on foreign students. And to be honest, the provinces actually really pushed back against that. Quebec really pushed back against that because it does fund their post-secondary institutions, and that's particularly the case in Ontario as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's maybe a province-by-province deal, depending on which provinces, how they're managing their own systems, if they can prove that they actually are. But it does seem a little bit like this issue, or the government didn't want to look at a cap, and then this Canadian Press story came out and it sort of reignited it somehow.
Because they did in the interim, Carl, once they floated the idea, instead, just before Christmas, bring in some new rules. So like universities and colleges have to show that they can house the students that they come in. The income threshold to qualify to be an international student has increased as well. But then the report came out and they kind of changed their tune over the past few days. Do you anticipate that they're going to get a lot of pushback from provinces? Because even the way Minister Miller was phrasing it, like he's kind of really saying the provinces have dropped the ball here, so now we're going to have to come in, and think about a cap.
Yeah, it's the province's fault, right? It's not our target. It's the provinces that can't handle them. Listen, you will hear some pushback from provinces. You will hear some pushback from universities because, as America said, it is a major revenue streams for most universities. And you saw the uproar in Quebec when they moved to lower the number of out of Quebec students for the Anglo universities. There was a major pushback, and a lot of that is because of the money that's coming in from these international students. And if you cut that, then where are the universities going to look to get the money that is missing? That's going to be a key question. And the provinces are already saying, we don't have any room to maneuver here. So unless the feds are willing to step up their financing of post-secondary institutions, we're going to have a problem.
And just to add to that, the complexity, same with the temporary foreign workers. Those being in the system mean our food prices are lower than they would be if we had domestic workers doing that work. So there are, no matter what they do, there's
implications on a lot of different policy fronts. Shakir, just from a more political perspective, we heard a clip from the leader of the Conservatives as well. Does the opposition have to be careful in the way in which they navigate this issue too? It isn't actually, he hasn't spoken a lot about tying immigration to the housing crisis before this report from CP. Before Friday, he made those comments. Does he have to tread lightly on the area?
I'm not sure. I mean, he also doesn't put out a lot of policy, and he pretty much made a policy announcement, right, tying immigration to housing supply. So I think he realizes he can be pretty forceful on this issue. I think the polling that I referenced previously, they've probably done their own polling and realized that the Canadian environment right now is very receptive to doing something around immigration. And so I don't really see too many pitfalls with this proposal. I assume, the Liberals of the NDP might tread to the notion of conservatives being anti-immigrant, or even notions around xenophobia. I'm not sure that's going to work in this particular context, because I think the issue of housing is so front and center for so many Canadians that tying something that sounds so reasonable and so sensible as immigration to housing supply, I think it's going to resonate very well with a lot of Canadians moving forward, and it's going to put pressure on the government to address this issue in some way, right? There's been this long-standing misalignment of immigration and housing supply, and I think Priya is right to kind of pounce on that and continue to drive that forward.
Sabrina, last word to you on that.
I think I agree with Shakir. I think the polling is in the favor of the Liberals being able to actually act on immigration right now. And so I don't think that there's going to be that draw into, tying people down for xenophobia or anything like that because of the housing and the labor issue. But I think that what the risk is that if you continue to have Pierre kind of talk about this, there's always that risk of xenophobia and like that dog whistle for those deep right baseline voters that he's advocating for. And so it'll be interesting to see like whether or not the Conservatives can control that messaging on their side and continue to keep on just talking about affordability and housing in particular without really degrading the like notion of an immigrant or the value of an immigrant themselves.